Welcome, everybody, to the FanDuel Lineup Builder Show. I am CJ Kaltenbach, otherwise known as The Siege. I'll be your moderator slash host here, and I'll let the real experts do most of the talking here. First up, associate editor of 4for4 and co-founder of Roster Coach, TJ Hernandez. TJ, how are you?
What's up, guys? Excited to see what you got in store for me because this week looks pretty hard. So this should be
the FanDuel was brutal. I was building cash teams on FanDuel, and I was just like, this is not fun. The winner of the monster, Mr. Shotgun himself, you guys know him as Notorious, Derek Farnsworth. Derek, how are you?
Dude, doing good. My biggest payday to date. So, I was pretty happy about that. And, the wife busted out some beers to Shotgun, so that was fun.
Oh, man. Only Mrs. Noto, I think, would do that. Martellus Bennett was on the winning roster, right?
Yeah, we had quite a few plays from the show last week. We had Meredith and Bennett. Hopefully people are watching and taking our advice.
Yeah, absolutely. So as always, we will go ahead and I will fire up a screen share here, and we will go basically 2 or 3 rounds deep at each position here this week, and we'll kind of talk about our plays. And if we actually disagree, we'll disagree and we'll talk about them. Well, let's start off to the monster winner himself, Mr. Derek, and we'll let him get started.
All right. My favorite quarterback of the week is Drew Brees. He's going to be chalky, but I think you can use him in all formats like we always talk about. Quarterback ownership is pretty spread apart. I mean, even last week we saw Big Ben and Tom Brady that were under 20%. So I like Brees. He's averaged 26 fantasy points per game at home last year, 29 this year. Scored at least 23 in each of his last 7 home starts. And, we've seen what teams can do against this Panthers secondary. So I'll be on Brees quite a bit at 8,500.
Yeah, he's my favorite play of the week. TJ, where are you at on Drew Brees?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably have more of him than I will of Cam, but I do think that people are probably going to look at the over-unders and say that they think they need to be overweight on this game because it's the only game with the over-under over 50. But also, the low scores aren't that low. There's no game with the over-under under 43. So I think if you take a closer look at it, you realize that the scoring should be closer this week than other weeks, and you could spread out your shares a little bit more, and you don't have to be so worried about being super overweight on that game. That being said, I'm on the Brees side of this because he is at home in the Dome.
I love Drew Brees. I just marked him down for 50%. That's probably where I'm going to try to end up here on the Sunday-only slate. It was a little different on Thursday through Monday, as we'll talk about here after TJ goes ahead and gives his first guy.
Yeah, mine, and it looks like there might be a little bit of weather concerns, but I'm still going to lock him in quite a few lineups for now. That's Russell Wilson. Atlanta had a good game last week, so I think some people might forget that their secondary is not good, but that was against inexperienced Paxton Lynch. Teams throw 75% of the time in the red zone against the Falcons. Russell Wilson's one of the most efficient touchdown scorers in the league. He's got Jimmy Graham back. Looks like Tyler Lockett's going to be at full health, so full complement of weapons. Really like Russell Wilson as a tournament play this week.
Derek, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, he's one of the guys I have listed. Falcons haven't been great against the pass, 28th in schedule adjusted DVP. And, now that he has a healthy Jimmy Graham, I think he's got more weapons coming off the bye week. Hopefully he'll start running a little bit more. I don't think he's rushed for more than 14 yards this year. But I think that changes this week at home.
Yeah, I have a feeling when we get to tight end, we might have a take just as hot and just as good as Martellus Bennett last week. But I will save that for tight end. I went back, and if you guys just noticed, I clicked in the Monday night game because I think Carson Palmer is going to be one of the most under-owned players of the week. Everyone is down on this Arizona offense. They say they're done, but this is the same Jets secondary that just got gashed by Pittsburgh. They're flying out to the West Coast for this big game. Carson Palmer coming off the concussion. He would have been ready to go last week if they had had a full week, but they had played on short rest. Arizona off 10 days at home. I don't see how Carson Palmer doesn't throw for 303 here. And I'm getting a bit of a discount off of Brees and Wilson. So Carson Palmer on any slate that has him is going to be a key component of my teams. Derek, what is your thoughts on Carson Palmer this week?
Yeah, we love taking quarterbacks against the Jets, great against the run. And, even I think you could even play David Johnson just because he does so much work out of the backfield, catching the ball, a lot like Le'Veon Bell did last week. But I really like that play. If you're playing the Sunday, Monday slate, I think you got to get him in there.
TJ, you like Carson Palmer this week?
Yeah, the only team that allows a higher touchdown rate through the air than the Jets is the Lions. Obviously, Lions are one of the worst secondaries in the league. So I like that play if I am playing Sunday, Monday.
All right, TJ, fire away. Give us another quarterback that you're interested in this week.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one that it looks like there could be some win concerns, but just given, not even that I think his upside is that great, but given that the salary is so tight this week and that it could open up some things for you elsewhere, I think I will have some shares of Alex Smith against the Raiders. I mean, I know we keep going back to this Chiefs passing game, but I'm going to go with one more swing at it. There was reverse line movement early in the week. The line opened up Raiders -2. Early betting was on the Raiders, but it still moved in favor of Kansas City. So I'm going to go back to it, and mainly because it's really, really hard to fit in everyone if you end up with these top price quarterbacks.
Yeah, I am back on the Raiders D this week. I think that they showed a lot of improvements last week for me, and I'm just if my week comes down, if I'm playing Raiders D, I need Alex Smith to throw for 303. Derek tried that 1 week. We all know how that ends up going. Derek, what's your thoughts there on the Kansas City passing attack? I'm sure you're higher on it than I am.
Yeah, I'm glad you disagree, Siege. You know, we've been taking some slack on Twitter just because we've been agreeing on pretty much everyone on the show. But yeah, I'm with TJ on this one. Andy Reid's 15-2 coming off of a bye. Jamal Charles expected to get a little bit more work, and they've been airing it out 42 times a game. Raiders secondary just continues to get roasted. I really like Alex Smith. He's probably a cash game option too. I mean, what's the worst he could do? At 6,800. So there's not very much value in the slate. So if you're looking for a cheap quarterback, he's my favorite.
I think the world is jumping off the Raiders defense at the wrong time. Like, they gave up 31 points last week, but a lot of that was pretty fluky at best. Like, they got called for some phantom pass interference calls in the end zone, and Melvin Gordon got 1-yard touchdowns. That could have been 8 points less easy. They got beat on a trick play, and then they gave up one big play after they should have had a fumble recovery. The ball just kicked the wrong way. I think the Raiders defense is still better than people are giving it credit for. Alex Smith is Alex Smith. I think that this is a spot come Sunday night. People are going to go, the Raiders defense was at home in a game with weather concerns, and we didn't play any Oakland defense. What were we thinking? I love that there's weather concerns in this game because I already don't like Alex Smith. Alex Smith in rain, I think, is even better. This is a situation where I'm going to be very heavy on the Raiders defense again, and I'm going to have next to none of this passing attack this week. All right, Derek, fire off your next play here.
All right, so since TJ stole my cheap guy, I'm going to go up to Tom Brady. First game at home since coming back from injury. We saw what he did last week, 406 yards and 3 touchdowns. In a game where, the Pats were ahead by quite a bit the entire game. He has so many weapons to use, and I think we could have a repeat performance. The hard part for me is picking which pass catcher to pair him with. But, yeah, I think he's a solid play. I think he's going to have lower ownership than Breeze and Newton.
Yeah, I think Brady's spot on FanDuel is just 500 more than Breeze, and 600 more than Russell. I can never pull the trigger, which means it's probably the greatest tournament play ever. TJ, I assume you're kind of on board there.
Yeah, I always like going up to those more expensive guys where the cheaper guys are in the apparent better spot because, like you said, that always brings the ownership down a little bit, and everyone's going to be on the Cam and the Breeze side of it. So I love doing that in tournaments. Probably won't end up with a huge amount of exposure just because how restrictive pricing is, but I do like it, especially with one of his cheaper options, which we'll get into a little bit later.
Yeah, you guys have left me some interesting options here. I think I'm going to scroll down a bit here. And if I'm going down, I'm going to Brian Hoyer. This guy has just been good. Ever since he took over the job, he's got some decent weapons in Jeffrey, Royal, and Meredith. The Jaguars defense we know is nothing to be scared about. He's 7K. He's put up really good scores here each of the first 3 weeks. I don't know why people are scared off of him in tournaments. I'm going to roll out some Brian Hoyer this week. Meredith will be super high owned, but I don't think Hoyer will be high owned at all. Let's go with Derek. What do you think there?
Yeah, I agree. 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in every start this season. Jaguars, they're a little bit better, worse against the run than they are against the pass, but their defense isn't scaring anyone. I still think he's underpriced on FanDuel. Yeah, I like the play quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting spot. TJ, you on board with Hoyer?
My only concern is that his 3 games so far have been one, a lot of garbage time, two against really bad secondaries. Jacksonville's not great, but they're not horrible. But on the other side of it, this should be one of the fastest paced games of the week. We know Jacksonville's going to throw a ton, which should up the pace on the other side of the ball. Chicago's been pretty pass heavy in their own right, but I don't know if that's going to continue. I mean, they like what Jordan Howard's doing, so we could see a little bit more of a run heavy attack. I'm fine with it, though.
All right, I want to get rid of a few of these guys. No Colin Kaepernick interest here, right? No Case Keenum interest against the bad Lions D?
None for me.
Ryan Tannehill against Pittsburgh?
Absolutely not.
I don't hate it, but yeah, that's fine.
I hate it.
All right, so let's talk about Tannehill for a second there. There's some difference in opinions. Derek, why don't you hate it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a spot where they're going to be trailing, and he's cheap. Landry's one of my favorite receivers on the week, which we'll get to. So, I mean, I probably won't have a ton of him, but yeah, I mean, I don't hate the play just because he's going to be airing it out quite a bit.
All right, and TJ, why were you on the other side there that you were just like wanted him off the board as fast as we could click the X button?
Garbage time favors the receiver, not the quarterback. The Dolphins have the highest adjusted sack rate in the league. Tannehill has the highest interception rate in the league. I think that they are in danger of going full Kansas City against Pittsburgh this week.
All right. One guy I want to get rid of, and I know there's been a lot of buzz about him this week. I have zero interest in Tyrod Taylor on any site. You guys on board with me on this? Like, there's no pass catcher there. This is the LaShawn McCoy show.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys about Tyrod because they just don't not only do they not throw the ball, but they don't throw the ball when they get near the goal line either. I mean, I guess people's argument is that there's going to be more volume because they're playing the 49ers, but I think that just means more volume for Shady. Yeah, I don't see it with Tyrod at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the play over on DraftKings. I think he's 5,300 over there. But I think there are better spots. I probably won't have very much of him this week.
All right, so let's slide over to running back then. I think unless there's another quarterback you guys wanted to mention before we move on.
Do we have exposure to Cam in there?
No, but let's do that. Good point. I do like Cam this week.
What are you guys' thoughts? Are they going to have less designed runs for him, or do you think it's just going to be business as usual?
I'll have the John Stewart hedge in some tournament teams just in case, but I'm planning on Cam Newton being the guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let you guys have the John Stewart. It's always I think Cam, he's like top 5 in the league and runs inside the 10 the last 3 years, and it's actually been a lot of Greg Olsen near the goal line, so I'd rather have that side of it.
I agree, but I'll make the case since we're sliding over the running back. I'll hop on first. Look, the top-end running backs are awesome. They really are. But, you're not going to be able to fit everybody. You can't pay up at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. It doesn't quite work like that, unfortunately. So I have to find values. And I do think that if Cam Newton doesn't get the goal line rushes, they will go to John Stewart. We saw Cameron Artis-Payne. He got 2 last week with Derek Anderson. If they want to be careful with him this week, if John Stewart gets in the end zone once, goes for 80 yards, and, like has 100 all-purpose yards and a touchdown for 6,300, I'll take that this week because now I'm getting to wide receivers that most people can't get to. Not my favorite play down here, but I definitely think it's a leverage play. If you're playing a bunch of tournament teams with that game, you got to have some, right, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the play. The thing about it for me is I would usually like to use him when Cam was going to be, really popular. I don't know how popular Cam's going to be this week, so I'd rather just load up on that side and take a shot on another value back. But I see the argument for sure.
All right, Derek, let's fire away running backs. I'm just locking in Le'Veon Bell. We don't need to talk about him. That's not going to help anybody. Like, he's the GOAT. That's fine. So pick someone that's not named Le'Veon.
Yeah, so I think we probably all like the same 3 guys this week. After Le'Veon, I like LaShawn McCoy. We already talked about him a little bit. He's broken off a lot of long runs this season. He just continues to get tackled right at the 1-yard line. He's going to get the touchdowns. He's in a revenge spot against Chip Kelly. Niners play up in pace. They have one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. Perfect game script at home, big favorite. How do you not like him at 8,200?
You
have to. And I think DeMarco Murray would be your next guy, TJ, right?
Yeah, I mean, all those top guys I really like a lot. Going to have plenty of exposure to them, but the player that I'll probably be most overweight on this week, and not necessarily highest owned, but most overweight, is Lamar Miller. Just because I think people are – I mean, he's been burning people all year. He's getting the work, but he's not getting the touches. The Texans have an implied point total that's 7 points over their point-per-game average, which just is indicative of more scoring. So hopefully he starts getting that work near the goal line. He's accounted for almost 90% of the touches inside the red zone for the Texans. The touchdowns just haven't been there. So I'm going to take Lamar Miller against a team in the Colts that really bleeds points to running backs.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Sheedy. I don't think I've ever not liked him. But for me, I'm pivoting in a lot of tournament teams to Ezekiel Elliott. This guy has just crushed every single week. And there's this narrative that the Packers' run defense is good. Outside of a limited Adrian Peterson in week 2, and that game was kind of just a fluke. They didn't even use him a lot. Do you guys know who the best running back the Packers have faced this year is?
TJ Yeldon.
It's either TJ Yeldon or Theo Riddick. Darkwa, Theo Riddick, TJ Yeldon. We don't know what this Green Bay defense is. These are situations I love to attack in tournaments because everyone's going to see the one next to the Packers name. They're going to see they've given up less than 50 yards a game rushing. Most teams don't give up a ton of yards rushing to TJ Yeldon, Darkwa, and Theo. So we don't know what this Packers run defense is. What I do know is I know Dallas is the best offensive line in football. I know Ezekiel Elliott's has gotten more fantasy points each and every week. This is a game on the road. If they get a lead and they use him 30 times, 202 isn't out of the question, and that just wipes out all the chalk. I love the pivot play in tournaments. TJ, how crazy am I?
Well, you are crazy, but I don't think because of this pick. I mean, the thing about the thing about running back this week on FanDuel is you're either really going to have to put your stake in a guy or you're going to have to spread it out pretty evenly because all these top guys are like bunched so close together in price. And I think the route I'm going to go is spreading out my shares somewhat evenly. So kind of the split up we have here is probably how I'm going to be approaching my tournaments this week.
Derek, what are your thoughts on Zeke?
Yeah, I mean, Elliott at basically no ownership is always a little appealing. But, I mean, even if you look at Football Outsiders DVOA, the Packers are still ranked second, which is schedule adjusted a little bit. And, I mean, they're holding runners to 1.99 yards per carry. I mean, even if you're facing, awful running backs, that's pretty good. They're just constantly in the opponent's backfield. And I don't know. I mean, if the Packers get out to a big lead, it worries me a little bit.
I should note there's a tad of reverse line movement in this game. The Packers were 4.5. It's down to 3.5. So I think that has been – I saw that yesterday, and it made me feel much better about this Zeke pivot. All right, Derek, give us another running back. Maybe we'll slide down here a little bit. If you're not paying all the way up, and I forgot to add Lamar Miller here. I know we like him a bit, and I know TJ does as well. We'll add some Lamar Miller. Let's slide down a bit. Let's say you're trying to get up to maybe the mid-tier wide receivers – that we'll get to next, and you need to pay down somewhere. Do you have a favorite here? Maybe let's say below, like Christine Michael and below.
All right. Well, yeah, that's a good spot because he's my guy at 7,400. Thomas Rawls is still out in the last game. Michael had 23 touches, and he saw 6 targets out of the backfield, which is always good to see for running backs. It's a perfect game script for him. They're huge favorites at home. Falcons, were good against the Broncos running game last week, but they're still ranked 24th in DVOA against the run. And, I just expect him to be a heavy workload guy that not a lot of people are talking about.
Yeah, the price on FanDuel is a tad excessive for me. If I'm going to play him, I'm going to play him on DraftKings probably. But, TJ, what's your thoughts there on Michael?
Yeah, I just like this offense as a whole against the Falcons as big home favorites. I think that – Michael's getting all the work. He's going to see 18 to 20 touches, and he's in the top 5 in touches inside the 10-yard line. So I think he's fine. I'm going to have a lot of Seattle this week. And if the weather ends up being like the report looks like right now, then it could be even a better play.
All right. Well, I'm not playing Jamal Charles here at 7,100. You guys paying him at that price when we don't know what his workload's going to be?
No, I'm not.
All right. Goodbye.
Yeah, I need to see what they're going to do with that backfield first. I've heard some people talking about it as like a sneaky play, but I just can't touch it right now.
All right. Devonta Freeman in Seattle, no, right?
Not for me.
No Blunt with Brady back, right?
Mm-mm.
No
But I
Lacy,
like the other running back on that team.
Lacy. Lacy against Dallas, if he plays, I can't go there.
No.
Jeremy Hill, no, he's in a sling. Forte against Arizona, no. TJ Yeldon, no. Matt Jones, no. So after I've kind of eliminated a bunch of these guys, now we're kind of down into this 6,700 and below tier. You guys have any guys here? Because I have one or two I want to mention, but maybe you guys like them as well. We'll start with Derek.
Yeah, I kind of like Mark Ingram a little bit. 6,700. He missed practice yesterday with an illness, and I think people have a hard time just rostering guys that are questionable heading into the game. So even if he's declared active, I don't expect him to have very high ownership. I want as much exposure to this game as I can get. And even though he's sharing some work with other running backs there, we saw Jacquizz Rodgers run for 101 yards against Panthers last week. So I think it's a pretty good spot for him at only 6,700.
Yeah, TJ, I assume you're going to be on board Ingram. It sounds like you like that game a ton this week.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting leverage play because both of these teams have actually been really good at defending the pass inside the red zone. They've allowed a really low touchdown rate. Teams have scored a lot through the air on big plays. That's why we see those inflated passing numbers against both teams. But those are hard to predict, and if it does turn into a spot where the teams are getting in close, we could see both rushing attacks really producing big fantasy points.
Yeah, for sure. TJ, do you have a guy down here?
Yeah, I was going to touch on Ingram. I liked Riddick, but it looks like he didn't practice today, so he could be out. I think maybe a sneaky guy is Ryan Matthews against the Redskins. Before he got hurt, he was tops in the league in touches inside the 10-yard line. I think he comes back. I think people are going to look at the other running backs and think that Ryan Matthews isn't a viable play, but Washington hasn't been very good against running backs or on defense at all. So I think that I'll have quite a few shares of Matthews.
I love Ryan Matthews, favorite punt play of the week, and I think he's going to go under on Redskins, giving up 130 yards on the ground. And if it's just a two-man guy with Matthews getting all the red zone work, I'm perfectly fine with that against a Redskins team where they could run the ball 30 times combined. Derek, what's your thoughts on Ryan Matthews?
Yeah, I saw 16 touches last week in a game where they were trailing, and Washington allows 5.8 yards per carry, so definitely a good spot for Matthews.
Yeah, I love Matthews this week. I think I ended up like 80% on Thursday lock just because I didn't think anybody would go there early. You mentioned Riddick is out. So what's your interest level in Justin Forsett if Riddick is ruled out at 4,900?
0. I mean, he's just not as good as Theoretic, especially in a passing game, which is where I would have wanted to attack this defense. I don't think they're going to be able to run between the tackles that much, and it could just turn into a lot of Marvin because their top cornerback, his name's slipping my mind right now, but the Rams' top cornerback's out this week too.
I just think if I'm going to get a running back that's going to get 70% of the snaps at 4,900, I have to consider it in tournaments. Not that I want to be rusting Justin Forsett, but he wasn't terrible last year. And if he gets like 60, 70 yards total and a touchdown, like he's at 13 FanDuel points for 4,900, and now I can go pay up at wide receiver. I'm going to have some tournament shares. I hope Theo plays so I don't have to do that because I don't really want to.
But it looks like Washington's going to play and then Zach Zenner's going to be there. Like, what's the realistic chance that Forsett gets any touches inside the 10-yard line?
I hadn't seen the news Washington was going to play. I thought Washington.
He practiced today.
He practiced in full or limited?
I think it was limited, but he was practicing.
Yeah, well, then that would really kill that. What is the point of signing Justin Forsett if Washington's getting back this week? Whatever. These teams, it's like the Browns. They promoted their third stringer last week, and cut Whitehurst. I was like, you should have done that last week. Charlie Whitehurst should have never been in the game. If you thought Kevin Hogan was ready now, he should have been on your active roster last week. Yeah. Any interest in Terrence West 6,500 before we move on here? Or no, not for you guys?
Not for me.
Yeah, I want to wait to see what their new coordinator does.
I don't mind it as a slow-owned option. TJ, I know you wanted to mention James White. You want to take the floor there?
Yeah, actually like two guys at this price point just because you need to save some salary somewhere. With Tom Brady in the lineup last week, White and Blunt saw their snap share pretty much flip-flop. White was right at 50%, I believe, but he saw 9 touches for 89 total yards. If you can get him 90 to 100 yards, 5 or 6 catches, and find the end zone, if you're looking at 18 to 20 points under $6,000, you're sitting nice and you're saving money at a spot where other people aren't going to be. So I think that if you're going with Tom Brady, stacking him with a running back could be a really interesting play.
Yeah, and I've seen the other guy down here is Gio.
Yeah, Bill Belichick's forte is taking away the team's top passing option. That's obviously A.J. Green. I think Cincinnati will be behind. Looks like they're going to have to throw. Jeremy Hill's in a sling. So I like Gio too.
Yeah, I think Gio is one of my favorite options this week in terms of just like I'm paying down at running back when I can, just because I think that what it gets you at wide receiver on FanDuel is just worthy of it. And so speaking of wide receivers, let's move on to wide receivers. The top is going to be very unowned this week because you simply can't afford it with people paying up. Is there any guys up here that you are willing to take a stand on if you're paying down at running back to pay up for? We'll start with Derek. Any of these top-end guys that you really like?
Yeah, regardless of the opponent, regardless of the week, I'm going to have some Antonio Brown exposure. The way, like you mentioned, the way roster construction shakes out, these top guys aren't going to be owned. And, Antonio Brown's usually 25% owned or more. So I think it's a great spot for him in tournaments. We saw what A.J. Green did to this Dolphins defense a couple weeks ago. I know Big Ben has some bad splits on the road in his career, but Antonio Brown's aren't terrible. Even if Big Ben doesn't have a huge game, I still think Brown could have a monster game.
Yeah, I'm probably just going to completely fade Brown this week. I can't pay that much more than everybody else. TJ, where do you stand on that?
I'll probably try to be right on par with the field on Brown. Even though he's so expensive, I still think he'll see an ownership percentage probably in the 10-15% range. Like people are just going to see that name and click it. So I don't think that I want to fade the best wide receiver in the league and have no exposure to him. So I'll probably be right in that 10 to 15% range as well.
Yeah, this is just a situation where the price is just too high over these other guys. Like, because my favorite guy in this price range of the upper tier, Allen Robinson, I think he hasn't been on the main slate in 3 weeks. I think everyone's forgotten about Allen Robinson as much as you can forget about him. They tell you by Sunday afternoon, people will not forget Allen Robinson for a while. He's going to go off. Bears secondary is prone to giving up a lot of good big plays. They moved Jalen Ramsey from outside of the slot. That just is even more of a boost to Allen Robinson. They moved their slot guy outside. He couldn't cover in the slot. What makes you think they can cover him outside? I love Allen Robinson this week. I don't mind paying the premium here on FanDuel because I'm going to get lower ownership. He's probably my favorite tournament play to pay up for. Derek, what's your thoughts on Allen Robinson this week?
The Bears give up more passing plays over 15 yards than anyone in the NFL. They're ranked 27th in DVOA against wide receiver ones. I love Robinson too.
TJ, what's your thoughts there? You on board?
Yeah, I mentioned this is probably going to be one of the fastest paced games of the week. And Allen Robinson's he's had a function of some really bad matchups. I think that this is a bounce back spot for him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, TJ, fire away. Who do you got? Who do you like in this upper wide receiver tier, if anybody?
My favorite expensive guy is Jordy Nelson. He leads the league leads all wide receivers in red zone target share. He's right up there in targets inside the 10-yard line. Ran some numbers this week. He's actually the most consistent wide receiver week to week in terms of his team's target share. I think his lowest target share in 1 week has been 28%, as high as 30%. So we know he's going to see about a third of those targets. And when they get in close, it's just going to be the Jordy show.
What's your thoughts on Jordy Nelson? I worry about the pace of this game, so it's probably I'm not sure I'm going to pay this price. What do you think, Derek?
Yeah, I was going to say, I like his touchdown equity here, but the pace does worry me. Even the Packers are playing slow this season. They're bringing the play clock down to one a lot more often than we've seen in the past, and we know the Dallas Cowboys like to control the clock as well. So that's my only concern there.
All right, Derek, why don't you go ahead and fire another receiver in this upper tier?
All right, I'll go Odell Beckham. Didn't really have a very big game last week, kind of bailed out by a late touchdown. And he went from being a sneaky GP play earlier in the week to being sort of a cash game chalk play. I think it was more of a byproduct of the value that opened up at running back last week. We saw DeAndre Washington. He was just dirt cheap. I think he was 4,700 on FanDuel, which really opened everything up. So I don't expect his ownership to be that high again this week in terms of Odell Beckham. He'll line up against Jimmy Smith, which I think is a winnable matchup for him. And I like that the game's at home.
Thoughts, DJ?
My thought is that I'm happy you put a 5 next to his name. So I'm guessing you're kind of closer to where I am on this. I'm at the point where I was on Odell a lot because of his usage, but Eli's just bad right now. Eli's playing so bad that it's getting close to like Tennessee Titans where I don't want any of the passing game no matter what the matchup is. So I'm not going to have a ton of Odell this week.
Yeah, he's just been bad in the first half of his entire career, and I'm just willing to buy it at this point. I'll probably hop on in a couple weeks, but I don't know. Maybe if Detroit comes back with 2 running backs or something, and I can get down, or Green Bay has to start Don Jackson at running back if Starks and Lacey are out. I don't think that's a high probability, but it's probably not out of the woods yet. So I definitely don't think I'm going to be heavy on Odell Beckham. The guy in this price tier who I think is going to be the lowest owned, has the first good matchup he's had in 4 weeks on an offense with a guy that's going to be mega chalk this week. Great pivot play. I love Alshon Jeffrey this week. He's had 3 terrible matchups in a row now. I think everyone's going to see Cameron Meredith and just be like, oh, he's like the new number 2 in this offense. That might be true, but Alshon Jeffrey is the one. And he's going to show this week why he's the one. I really like this spot here this week. I'm going to have as much Alshon as I can probably fit into my teams. I think he's going to come in at like 7 or 8%, and he can go off at any point. So I love Alshon Jeffrey at this price point this week. Derek, what's your thoughts there on Jeffrey?
I don't think anybody's going to be on him. The touchdown is going to come. Do we know who Prince Amukamara is going to be lining up against? Not that it's a huge difference. I just curious.
I can pull it up. I think he's got Hearns, but I could be wrong. I'm sorry. I think he's got
Meredith.
Royal. Sorry.
Yeah, because I think he's ranked in the top 5 Pro Football Focus. So just something to look at. If he ends up lining up against Meredith or something like that, I think Jeffrey becomes an even better play.
Yeah, I definitely I don't think he's going to be on Jeffrey. Even if he's on Jeffrey, I don't think that's it'd be a problem, but I still think it's just worthy of having his ownership. It's not like a guy I don't view Prince and McMorrow like I do Avonte Davis or a guy like that. TJ, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I kind of subscribe to the squeaky wheel narrative. We saw Alshon kind of lose it at the end of the game last week. So I think that we've talked about it before in the show that Hoyer's going to find one receiver to lock in on. I think it's finally Alshon's turn, and I keep touching on the fact that I think this is going to be the highest pace game of the week, which is really important to me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. TJ, let's scroll down a little bit here. Let's start maybe like a Kelvin Benjamin. Obviously, I think we're gonna like him, so I'll just throw some ownership on him. So let's talk about maybe this mid-tier, a couple guys that you're interested in here.
Yeah, there's quite a few guys I like in this tier, but the one I'll probably end up with the most of, assuming weather isn't that bad, is Doug Baldwin against the Falcons. Teams are passing 75% of the time against the Falcons. Doug Baldwin ranks in the top 10 in the league in red zone target share. So I think that I'll be having a lot of him with my Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go more with the other guy in this passing attack, but I definitely will have shares of Doug Baldwin too. What's your thoughts there, Derek, on Doug Baldwin?
So yeah, his last 7 games at home, 6.8 receptions, 108 yards, 1.3 touchdowns per game. He's going to line up against free agent Brian Poole or undrafted free agent Brian Poole. I love Baldwin. I'm going to have a ton of him.
Yep, already. Des, I'm not playing you even if you play. Brandon Cooks, I think we both agree, is in a good spot with Drew Brees. What's your interest level in Brandon Marshall against Patrick Peterson? I don't have any, but I could see the case that he's just going to get fed with so many targets.
Go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, when there's only a couple corners in the league that are really going to kill a player's value, and Patrick Peterson's one of them. He shadows. They already said he's definitely going to shadow this week. So it's a play that I'm not going to be on, even though I usually do love wide receivers, really elite wide receivers in apparently poor matchups, but this is not one of those spots for me.
Alrighty, we will X out Brandon Marshall. What's your thoughts on Larry Fitzgerald this week? I like this spot for Fitzgerald. He's not my favorite Arizona wide receiver this week. Is that where you stand, Derek?
Yeah, I'm kind of on board. I think I'd rather just go naked Palmer. I always have a hard time picking the wideouts in that offense.
TJ, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think I know who your other favorite wide receiver is. I'm on the smoky side of this game too.
Okay. Alrighty. So I guess we'll just let the cat out of the bag. I love John Brown this week. On DraftKings, I will have 100% in Thursday, Monday. The price there is super cheap. He's super cheap here too. He's the number 2. Michael Floyd's been demoted. He had he had 2 weeks of double-digit targets before that Blaine Gabbert and Drew Stanton game that I'd never want to go back and watch again. It burned my eyes. But I think with Carson Palmer back, John Brown's going to be back to getting 10 to 12 targets against this Jets secondary. And I don't think anyone's realized how good he's been these last few weeks. I'm going to have as much John Brown as I can possibly fit. I know this is a lineup builder show, so I won't go as high as I will. I'll put in 40%. But just know that I would be willing to go up to that percentage. I'll plug in 40 for the sake of everyone's sanity. TJ, thoughts on John Brown?
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that we saw at the end of last year. He can really take a lot of those red zone targets away from Larry Fitzgerald. We saw his target numbers going up before Palmer got hurt. So I think the offense is going to start trending back towards John Brown.
Derek, I know you said you were more willing to play Palmer naked. Did we talk you into John Brown?
Well, so on DraftKings, I really wish that game was in the main slate. I think he opens things up so much that you just play him over there. But yeah, I'm fine with him if you're playing the Sunday, Monday slate on FanDuel.
All right, awesome. We talked about a couple more guys here. We'll eventually have to move on, but I do want to touch a couple guys here. Just give me a couple guys that you like in this tier. Or I'll just list a guy. You tell me if you don't like any of these because I want to get exposure to him. Cooper.
I like him.
Okay. Willie Snead.
I'm nervous about Snead. I think that Thomas is Snead was limited last week, didn't play the week before, but Thomas had 20 targets. That's a lot of targets, regardless of who's healthy or not. So I don't know what his target share is going to be with Cooks, Thomas, even Fleener to compete with.
Derek, are you worried about Snead?
I just want exposure to that game, so I'm fine with Snead.
All right, Jarvis Landry, I know is the guy that we like, right?
Oh yeah, one of the best cornerback matchups on the board. Coming off a 3-target game, I love him.
All right, this is a guy you guys like. I'll plug him in there for you. Will Fuller, where do you guys stand on Will Fuller? I don't believe that Colts coach for 1 second that Vontae's not shadowing DeAndre. Where do you stand on that, TJ?
Yeah, I think that I don't believe it either, but I still want the Lamar Miller side of this game. But like I mentioned, with Lamar Miller, Houston has an implied point total that is quite a bit higher than their point per game average. And although I do like Miller, Houston's been predominantly a pass team when they get near the goal line, even though they've been run heavy for the rest of the game. So I will have some exposures to Fuller, but he's not my favorite player at that price range.
All right, sounds good. Derek, you on board there?
Yeah, and I like the double dip with the Texans defense too.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite plays. Anybody else that we have to mention before we slide over to tight end?
2 guys, Cam Meredith and Marvin Jones. We didn't really talk about him. I know we all like him.
Yeah, we love Marvin Jones, and we definitely need to get some Cam Meredith here in our script. 30%, all right?
Yep.
A guy that I will have more than 0% of that's going to make chat laugh. 1% Ted Ginn. One. Saints, we watched what Odell Beckham did to that Saints D last year, just running vertical. And if there's one thing Ted Ginn can do, it's run vertical. Will he catch the ball? Probably not. But, hey, he's worthy of 1%. And out of 150 lineups, we'll get him on 1, maybe 2 max. Let's slide over to tight end here. I think tight end is really simple this week. And I know I'm probably in the minority here. I just think this is really simple. You play Delaney Walker, you play Jimmy Graham, 50-50, 70-30, whatever you want to do, and you move on. I guess Greg Olsen at 81 if you can make it work, but I can't pay that price. Where are you guys going at tight end other than those guys, or are those guys your core as well? We'll start with TJ.
I think I'll have a couple more guys sprinkled in. It's going to be really hard not to have any Greg Olsen just because of how I think that game will play out. But yeah, I think probably my highest on guy will be Jimmy Graham, which probably isn't a surprise at this point, the way I've been talking up the Seattle offense. Delaney Walker's in a really good matchup against Cleveland. But I do have one other guy that I think I'll have exposure to, but I'll let Derek touch on your guys first.
Yeah, I love all the plays. Graham, Walker, Olsen. I think got to have exposure to all of them. I think they all have 100-yard upside this week. One guy that I will have a few shares of is Zach Ertz. I always like to pick the players that just burned a ton of bridges the week before. He played 90% of the snaps. He ran a lot of pass routes, and nobody's going to be on him against the Redskins. At 5,400, I don't think he's that much of a worse play than he was last week, and he was 30% on.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I just think Philadelphia just spreads those passing targets out so wide. It's going to be tough to it's kind of like it reminds me of a poor man's Patriots, and the Patriots are hard to pick on in terms of pass catchers. So I can't imagine that it's going to get any easier this week with Philadelphia, who's not quite obviously the offense the Patriots are. TJ, what are your thoughts there on Ertz?
Yeah, I actually wanted to touch on Matthews because both he and Ertz kind of disappointed last week, but they're going to be facing a team that struggles similarly in the middle of the field like Detroit does last week. If people don't recognize that, I think they're going to be really scared to go back to both of these guys. So I like that call because of how deficient Washington is against interior pass receivers.
All right, let me go slide back over here and plug in Jordan Matthews, a guy who I was – as high as I've ever been on and couldn't have burned me any worse last week. So let's go get some Jordan Matthews exposure. We'll slide back over to tight end here. And so let's slide back over to tight end. Patriots tight ends, where do you guys stand on them? I'm not paying Gronk 8,400 for Gronk, and I'm going to let everyone chase the Bennett points. I'd much rather play Walker or Graham. You guys on that train?
Yeah, I may have a little bit of Gronk. He still had over 100 yards last week. And, we know what he's capable of, but I do like Olsen a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Jimmy Graham, are you guys concerned about the weather at all? It's supposed to be downpouring there. It doesn't actually bother me for Jimmy Graham. I think that's if Atlanta's secondary is just so bad versus tight ends that if they're just shorter passes, they're shorter passes instead of longer passes. I'm not concerned about it. I'd be actually almost makes me feel better because Doug Baldwin and Lockett probably can't stretch the field in a downpour. So for me, makes me happier about Jimmy Graham. Derek, you on board there?
Yeah, I'll be checking the wind of this game Sunday morning. As long as that's not an issue, I still like Seattle offense quite a bit.
TJ, what's your situation? What's your concern level with the wind and the rain there?
Yeah, I want to see the wind. When we're looking at lineups Friday, Saturday, so much can change with weather up until kickoff that it's one of those things you kind of have to wait and see for. Have some backup plans in place, but I think that it's just such a good spot for a guy like Jimmy Graham that I'm still going to be targeting him.
Yeah. What's everyone's interest level in Colby Fleener? Can I interest you in Colby Fleener?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He's 5,600. There's only 4 other tight ends on the main slate that are averaging 7 targets per game. He hasn't seen the red zone looks, but you want a little bit of exposure to as much of the players that you can get in this game. And if you could find a low on play, then I think you have to do it. You're going to have to pay down somewhere. We didn't even get to cheap wide receivers, but you're just not going to be able to fit that many players in, like you talked about, Siege. And tight end's a great spot to do it because it's the highest variance position. Like you want to spread out your shares a little bit evenly at tight end because it's a 1D position. Even the best tight end is going to bust. So I'm fine with having some Fleener.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can get back to cheap wide receivers because there's a couple guys I want to mention too, but I want to make sure we get through defense because I think defense this week is interesting. Let's see. We talked about Chicago and Jacksonville as a high-paced game. Any interest in either one of these tight ends? Zach Miller, Julius Thomas, both get some decent looks in the red zone, TJ.
I mean, does Julius Thomas even have a red zone look this year?
Yeah, he's got a red zone touchdown.
Okay. I probably won't have any Julius Thomas just because I'm more on Allen Robinson. Zach Miller's a fine play. I just don't think I'll have any of him. He's just not going to see the volume, and I think that it's going to be way more Alshon this week.
Okay. All right. Let's get to defense here. Nobody really cares about the kicker. So defense. You guys are going to talk to me about the Buffalo Bills. So which one of you wants to take it?
Yeah, I'll take it. Niners, we know they have bad offensive line. We know Kaepernick likes to hold on to the ball. They play at a fast pace, which is always good. Monster underdogs on the road. It's just hard not to like the Bills. You compare them with LaShawn McCoy for that correlation play. And they're not that pricey. At 4,800, they're not that much more than some of the cheaper defenses this week.
So, I think they're going to be – the Vikings last week on FanDuel were 35%. I think the Bills are going to get there, and the Bills don't deserve to get there. That's my case for not playing them. I think I'm going to be way underweight on the Bills defense according to the field, because if I see a 35% defense, I'm just going to fade just because of how volatile defensive touchdowns are. Like, they could be fine, but if another team scores a defensive touchdown, like, it might not be the highest scoring. TJ, where are you at on that? Do you think the Bills ownership gets that high?
I mean, if it does, that's ridiculous, but I'm kind of the same thought as you when it comes to being underweight on them, but I'm definitely still going to have exposure. If we look at Colin Kaepernick's career sack rate, it's over 9%. If we put that into terms of this year, it'd be the second highest in the league. So I think that the Bills will have a lot of chances for turnovers and a lot of sacks, but you just can't have that much exposure to a defense.
All right, so let's quickly go. Let's each give one defense that we like, and then I do want to go back to cheap wide receivers because if you're playing up at running back, it's probably something we should have touched on more. Poor hosting on my part. I'm going to plug in the Raiders, and you guys are going to hate it. That's fine. I love that spot, and they got me 9 fantasy points last week. Perfectly fine with that. It could have been 20, and hopefully this week they get me 20. Derek, not named Bills. Where are you going?
Give me the Texans at home against Andrew Luck. Colts have more pressures on the quarterback than any team in the NFL, and we know Luck turns the ball over quite a bit. There will be some points scored there, but I like the Texans' opportunities to create some turnovers. All
right, TJ, where are you going to go?
Pittsburgh favored by 7.5. I already touched on Miami's offensive line. I already touched on how bad Ryan Tannehill is and how many turnovers he produces. So I love Pittsburgh this week.
All right, we got just a few minutes left, but you guys are right. We definitely need to touch on cheap wide receivers more than we did. All right, we're back. We're down here at this awful tier, or maybe not so awful. Derek, cheap wide receivers. What are you playing this week? I have a guy that it's just disgusting, I'm going to say, but why don't you go name a guy first so I don't feel so bad?
I don't feel great about this one either, but I'll go with Tavon Austin. He's averaging – yeah, I mean, he's just averaging a ton of targets. I mean, he has one of the lowest ADOTs in the league, but, he can take one of those screens to the house on any play. He has that type of upside. They're playing in the fast track in Detroit, and he has a 30% market share in their passing offense.
Yeah, that's my guy. I'm with you. I couldn't believe it when Stevie first brought him up to me, and I was like, no. And then I listened to the facts, and I was like, oh, man, I'm going to need to make sure I have fresh beer in the fridge for this weekend. This could go ugly fast.
Every weekend.
Tavon Austin, your face looks like you just got hit by a freight train.
No, I mean, I feel like I got hit by a freight train because every time I make a lineup, like, I have to put him in there just because, like we talked about, you have to pay down. He's getting 9 targets per game, only 5 red zone targets, but that accounts for 36% of the team's red zone targets. He's also going to get some rushing plays in there, even if it's just 1 or 2. Those are more touches. You're not going to get this kind of volume at this kind of price almost ever. So, you have to do it. It's not going to be fun, but You have
Tavon Austin's first game on turf this year, too. Rams used to play on turf in St. Louis. They're now in LA, haven't been back on turf. Tavon Austin was always magician on turf. So I definitely think that's an interesting spot. Okay, TJ, another cheap wide receiver that you got interest in here.
I mentioned him, but I don't think we plugged him in. That's Michael Thomas. 20 targets last 2 games, even though Snead was out and then played limited snaps. He had quite a few looks inside. I think 4 looks inside the red zone, including a touchdown. So I think he's a guy that pay down for. He's going to get plenty of looks. Saints wide receivers lead the league in cumulative fantasy points this year. So there's a lot to go around in this offense.
Yeah, the guy I'm going to go with, we talked about Bill Belichick takes out your top option. If Tyler Eifert's out, I'm going to have interest in Brandon LaFell, just basically on the pure target situation. Like, he's the next best guy. It's technically revenge, but it's basically my betting that Bill Belichick will take A.J. Green out of the game, and if Cincinnati scores a touchdown, it's going to go to Gio or LaFell, and at 5,300, I have to have exposure to him. If Eifert's out, if Eifert's in, I think I'm just going to I'll just play more Tavon Austin and maybe go buy some liquor instead. Derek, where do you stand on that? On LaFell?
Yeah, like we mentioned, if they take AJ Green away, their production's got to come from somewhere. I like Giovanni Bernard quite a bit, and LaFell's not a bad play either. One other player I want to bring up, Chris Conley, assuming that the weather in that game is not too bad. Any deep GPP interest there?
Yes, I was just going to bring him up. TJ, what's your thoughts there on Chris Conley?
I think you're just spreading yourself a little bit too thin with Conley. I don't think he's going to be one of the primary options. There's other Chiefs spots to go. I won't have any.
I would much rather play Chris Conley than any other Chiefs guy this week. Like, that is the one guy you can get me to talk. Like, I'm on the Raiders D, but the one guy that you can get me on is Chris Conley. This guy is going to break out one of these games. Like, we know what Jeremy Maclin is. We know what Travis Kelce is. Like, I'm worried about vertical. You beat the Raiders through big plays. You don't beat them through dink and dunk. And Chris Conley is the big play threat in that offense. So I'm with you, Derek. I like Chris Conley here a bunch. Just a couple minutes left here, so we're going to quickly show you guys how you would do this. You would slide it over to 150. You throw that salary cap down a little bit. Make sure you don't have a quarterback, running back, kicker from the same team. And we'll just go ahead quickly and run this. Find multiple lineups here, and we'll quickly go through this. It will take it a minute here. While it loads, let's go do what we do every week. A DFS hot take and a season-long hot take. Derek, we'll start with you.
All right, I'm a glutton for punishment, so I'll go Odell Beckham, top scoring wide receiver of the week. And then, give me a minute for my real life call. Go ahead.
All right, so let me talk about the lineup builder here. As you can see, it came out with 150 lineups here, and it got pretty darn close to our exposure levels for all our favorite players here. 25% Tavon Austin, oh boy. 25% Texans D. Did a really good job. It mixed in some kickers for us. It's pretty much doing a really good job here with our exposure levels. It doesn't like the Oakland defense. I don't like this lineup builder anymore. Just kidding. But it did a really good job here with a lot of our favorites and getting them in here. And obviously, you could go through and delete all these guys that you don't want in your exposure to, and it will respond to that. It does a great job here. And I think it's going to be I like how it got us all our favorites in here. All right, TJ, DFS hot take.
I'm torn. I'm gonna go with Russell Wilson as his first 100 rushing yard game of the year.
Wow. I'm going to go with Ezekiel Elliott as the highest scoring running back this week, which corresponds to my real life prediction. Dallas beats Green Bay in Green Bay.
Nice.
Derek, real life.
Bills beat the Niners by 20.
Wow. No respect for San Fran on 10 days rest by 20. Man, Shady's going to go off if they win by 20.
And their D.
Oh, my goodness. TJ, what's your thought there for a hot take?
I'm going to go with Saints cover the over by themselves.
Wow. Isn't the total 53?
Yeah.
You think the Saints are going to score 53? Wow. That is flaming. I love it, though. If that happens, too, it's going to be a great week. I really, really hope you are right.
And Fleener 4 touchdowns.
Oh my goodness, guys. Anybody quickly here, like we got 30 seconds to go. Anybody that you wish we had talked about and didn't?
I think we pretty much touched on all of my guys.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
Favorite kicker of the week, Graham Gano, Will Lutz if you're fading the Saints, but I wouldn't do that. So once again, thank you everybody for joining us here on the FanDuel Lineup Show. For TJ, Derek, I am CJ. Have a good weekend, everybody. Enjoy your games.